I never imagined that the man I once loved would turn into the monster who struck me down when I needed him the most. I was 9 months pregnant when it happened. That night, I had forced myself to move despite the weight of my swollen belly, preparing dinner as I always did. But when I placed his plate in front of him, he didn't just reject it. He threw the food onto the floor, his eyes filled with disgust. His words cut through me like a blade. "You look like a monster," he sneered, his cruel laughter echoing in the room. My hands clenched into fists. For the first time in my life, I stood up to him. But the moment I did, his hand came down hard against my face, sending me crashing to the floor. Pain exploded through my body, but I barely had a second to react. As I struggled to lift myself up, gasping for air, he moved closer. And what he did next was far worse than the slap. My name is Elena Miller, and I am 27 years old. 3 years ago, I had a promising career at a well-known marketing firm. I was ambitious, independent, and excited about the future. That was when I met Daniel Carter, my boss. He was 31 at the time, charismatic, intelligent, and always in control. It didn't take long for us to fall in love. Daniel was not only my mentor but also my greatest supporter, or so I thought. His guidance at work made me respect him deeply, and soon, our professional relationship turned into something personal. He asked me out, and I was overjoyed. I had never been in a serious relationship before, and Daniel became my first love. After dating for a year, we got married. I felt incredibly lucky. He was handsome, successful, and well-liked by everyone. I proudly walked into our office as his wife, receiving congratulations from my colleagues. I thought I had the perfect life. But reality was about to hit me hard. A sudden change after marriage. The day after we registered our marriage, Daniel came home with an announcement that shattered my excitement. "Since you're my wife now, you'll be quitting your job." I blinked in shock. "What?" "Daniel, we never talked about this. I already informed them yesterday. You don't need to work anymore," he said casually, as if my career meant nothing. I wanted to protest. I had worked so hard to get this job, a position my father, a well-known businessman, had helped me secure. Leaving without notice felt irresponsible. "This is so sudden," I whispered, hoping he'd understand. But Daniel's sharp gaze stopped me. His expression darkened, warning me not to argue. "You're my wife now. Starting tomorrow, you stay home. I'll handle everything," he declared. I felt powerless. He had been my boss at work, and now he was trying to be the boss of my life. I should have resisted. I should have seen this as a red flag. But I didn't. Instead, I convinced myself that he just wanted to take care of me. I resigned from my job without even getting a chance to say goodbye to my colleagues. From that day, my entire life revolved around Daniel. Adjusting to life as a housewife was harder than I had imagined. At first, I tried to enjoy the change, believing that Daniel wanted the best for me. I woke up early every morning, made breakfast, and ensured everything was perfect for him. I dedicated myself to household chores, determined to prove that I could be a good wife. However, no matter how much effort I put in, Daniel never acknowledged it. He would come home from work, eat in silence, and leave his dishes on the table for me to clean. If I asked about his day, he would give short, uninterested answers. The warmth that once existed between us was fading, but I kept telling myself that things would get better. Over time, Daniel's expectations became stricter. He wanted the house cleaned in a particular way, meals prepared exactly to his liking, and my schedule to revolve entirely around him. If anything was out of place, his irritation was evident. One evening, after preparing a meal I thought he would enjoy, he took one bite, pushed the plate aside, and sighed. "You should know how to cook properly by now, Elena," he muttered before getting up from the table. His words stung. I had put so much effort into making sure he was happy, yet nothing was ever enough. What bothered me the most was the way he treated me like an employee rather than his wife. When I worked, I received recognition for my efforts, but at home, I got nothing but criticism. I started feeling invisible in my own marriage. He controlled every aspect of my life, from how I spent my day to what I wore when we went out. My opinions on household matters were dismissed, and if I ever disagreed with him, he would remind me that he was the one providing for us now. One evening, I worked up the courage to ask, "Daniel, don't you think it's unfair that I had to give up everything while nothing changed for you?" He set down his glass, looking at me with narrowed eyes. "You don't have to worry about a thing, Elena. I take care of all the important matters. You should be grateful." His voice was cold, making it clear that in his mind, this conversation was over. That was the moment I realized something. I was no longer an equal partner in this marriage. I was just an extension of Daniel's needs, existing only to serve him. As the months passed, Daniel's behavior became colder. He no longer pretended to be the loving husband I once believed him to be. Instead, he treated me like an inconvenience, a background figure in his life. His words, once full of affection, turned into sharp commands. If I tried to start a conversation, he barely listened. If I asked for anything, his patience ran thin. I told myself it was just stress from work, that he was tired, that things would improve. But deep down, I knew better. One evening, I wasn't feeling well. I had spent the entire day doing housework, and by the time Daniel came home, I could barely stand. My head was pounding, my body ached, and I just wanted to rest. When he walked through the door, I forced myself up from the couch. "Daniel, I'm not feeling well tonight. Can you make something for yourself?" I asked weakly. He stopped in the middle of the living room and stared at me as if I had said something ridiculous. Then, without a word, he walked into the bedroom. I sighed in relief, thinking he had understood. But a few seconds later, he returned, yanking the blanket off me. "Get up and make my dinner," he said sharply. I looked up at him in disbelief. "Daniel, I'm sick. Just this once, can you?" "Don't be lazy, Elena," he snapped. "You don't work. You have one job, to take care of the house. If you can't even do that, what are you good for?" His words stung more than I expected. He didn't care that I was sick. He didn't care how exhausted I was. All that mattered to him was that I did what he wanted. I forced myself to stand, my body weak and trembling, and made him dinner while tears streamed down my face. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I had ended up here. The man I had once loved, the man I thought would cherish me, had no empathy for me at all. And yet, I still held on to the hope that things would change. That somehow, he would remember the way he used to love me. But I was wrong. Things were only going to get worse. Months passed, and my unhappiness grew like a shadow that never left my side. Then, one day, I realized something was different. I had been feeling unusually tired, often dizzy, and my body felt off. When I checked the calendar, my heart skipped a beat. I had missed my period. Panic and excitement swirled inside me as I rushed to the nearest store and bought a pregnancy test. When I saw the positive result, I felt an overwhelming wave of emotions. I was going to be a mother. Despite everything, I smiled through my tears, thinking that maybe, just maybe, this would change things. Perhaps Daniel would be happy. Perhaps this was what we needed to reconnect. That evening, I prepared a special dinner, waiting anxiously for him to come home. When he finally walked through the door, I could smell the alcohol on him before he even spoke. He was drunk. My heart sank, but I had already decided. This was important. "Daniel," I began carefully, trying to mask my nervousness, "I have something to tell you." He walked past me, loosening his tie, not even looking in my direction. "What is it now?" he muttered, heading toward the kitchen. I took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the room was silent. My heart pounded as I waited for his reaction. I expected surprise, maybe even shock, but what I got instead shattered me completely. His face twisted in frustration, and he let out a heavy sigh as if I had just told him the worst possible news. Then, in a cold, irritated voice, he said, "A child? What have you done?" I blinked in disbelief. "What do you mean?" My voice barely came out as a whisper. "This is the worst," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want a child. If you're going to have it, you'll raise it alone." His words hit me like a slap. The excitement I had felt only moments ago vanished in an instant, replaced by a sinking feeling in my stomach. He didn't want this baby. He didn't want our baby. I felt my throat tighten as I forced myself to speak. Daniel, this is our child. How can you say that? He scoffed and walked past me, heading toward the bedroom. I never asked for this. If you want to ruin your life, go ahead, but don't expect me to be happy about it. Tears blurred my vision as I watched him disappear into the room. I placed a hand on my stomach, as if protecting the tiny life inside me from the cruel words that had just been spoken. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind raced with thoughts. How had I married someone so heartless? Was he always like this, and I had just refused to see it? Or had he changed after marriage? I didn't know the answer. But one thing became clear. I was going to have this baby, with or without him. Days passed after Daniel's cruel response to my pregnancy, and his behavior became even more distant. He came home late, barely spoke to me, and treated me as if I were nothing more than a nuisance. I was already emotionally drained, but my instincts told me there was something more. Something was wrong. Then, one evening, as I was doing the laundry, a small piece of paper slipped out of the pocket of one of Daniel's dress shirts. I bent down and picked it up, expecting it to be an ordinary receipt. But when I saw the name of the place, my entire body froze. A motel. At first, I refused to believe it. My hands trembled as I stared at the receipt, my mind racing. I felt sick. My first instinct was to convince myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe he had a work-related meeting? Maybe he had gone there for a friend? But deep down, I already knew the truth. Over the next few days, I paid close attention to Daniel's behavior. He never let his phone out of his sight, even taking it to the bathroom with him. He started dressing better, putting in extra effort before leaving for work. And worst of all, he barely even looked at me anymore. I knew what I had to do. I needed proof. I started checking his pockets whenever I did the laundry, searching for anything that might confirm my suspicions. I even considered hiring a private investigator, but I didn't have the money. Then, as if fate had intervened, I received a call from my father. I was surprised. He rarely called unless it was something important. "Elena," he said in his usual serious tone, "there's something you need to know." I could hear the hesitation in his voice. My father was a powerful businessman who had always been too busy for personal matters, but in that moment, he sounded concerned. "What is it?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I have some contacts in the corporate world. Someone from Daniel's company told me he's been having an affair with one of his junior employees." My breath caught in my throat. An affair. My father continued. "He's been with her for months. Maybe even before you got pregnant." I closed my eyes, trying to control the storm of emotions inside me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something, but instead, I held the phone tightly and whispered, "Thank you for telling me." As I hung up, my hands clenched into fists. So it was true. Daniel had been cheating on me this entire time. All the pain, all the humiliation, all the mistreatment. It suddenly made sense. He never wanted this marriage. He only wanted control. And now he was going to regret it. The night after I discovered Daniel's affair, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. My hands rested on my swollen belly, feeling the soft movements of the baby growing inside me. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was furious.
How could he do this to me?
I had given up everything for him, and he had betrayed me in the worst way possible. But I refused to let my anger consume me. I had to be smart. From that moment, I started planning my escape. I knew I couldn't confront Daniel yet. If he sensed that I knew the truth, he might find a way to manipulate me, just as he always had. I needed to gather everything I could to secure my future and my baby's future. First, I began keeping track of his movements. Whenever he came home late, I noted the time. Whenever he took a sudden business trip, I wrote it down. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Next, I reached out to my father. "I want a divorce," I told him firmly when we spoke the next morning. "But I need to do it on my terms." There was a brief silence before my father finally said, "Good. I'll help you." You deserve better than that man." Hearing those words brought an unexpected wave of relief. I had spent years convincing myself that I needed to stay, that things would get better. But now, with my father's support, I knew I could finally break free. And then, something unexpected happened. During one of our conversations, my father revealed something that left me stunned. An inheritance. "I wasn't going to bring this up yet," he said, "but I think you should know. I've arranged for you to receive a portion of the family's assets. Once the legal paperwork is finalized, you'll have access to $80 million. I nearly dropped the phone. $80 million. For the first time in a long time, I felt power returning to me. This was it. Daniel had taken everything from me, my independence, my dignity, my happiness, but he would never take my future. And soon, he would regret ever underestimating me. For the next few months, I played the role of the obedient wife, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I knew Daniel suspected nothing. He was too busy with his mistress, too confident in his control over me. But inside, I was counting down the days until I could finally walk away from him forever. By the time I was 9 months pregnant, my body was exhausted. Carrying the baby was difficult, and Daniel's treatment of me had only gotten worse. He no longer spoke to me unless he needed something, and when he did, his tone was always filled with irritation. Then, one night, everything changed. It was a quiet evening. I had spent the entire day in discomfort, my body aching under the weight of my pregnancy. But despite that, I still prepared dinner for Daniel, just as I always did. I set the table, placed his favorite meal in front of him, and sat down quietly, hoping for a peaceful night. But Daniel had other plans. He took a bite of the food, chewed for a moment, and then suddenly slammed his fork onto the table. "What the hell is this?" he spat, glaring at his plate. "This is disgusting." I froze. I had cooked the exact same meal I had made for him 100 times before. Before I could say anything, he grabbed the plate and threw it onto the floor, sending food splattering everywhere. My hands instinctively flew to my belly as I flinched at the sudden aggression. "Daniel, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. "This is what I've been thinking for a while now," he sneered. "You can't even cook properly anymore. You've become useless, Elena." I stared at him, my heart pounding. I had endured his cruelty for so long, but something about this moment, ***, the sight of my carefully prepared meal on the floor, the way he looked at me with pure disgust, ***, made me snap. For the first time, I stood up for myself. "If you hate me so much, Daniel," I said, my voice filled with quiet rage, "why don't you just leave?" His expression darkened. And then, without warning, he lifted his hand and slapped me across the face. The force of the slap sent me staggering backward, and I barely caught myself before I could fall. My cheek burned with pain, and for a moment, I was too shocked to move. Daniel stood over me, his eyes filled with nothing but cold indifference. "Know your place," he said simply. "You should be grateful I even let you stay in this house." I pressed a hand to my throbbing cheek, feeling the weight of everything I had been through crashing down on me at once. And at that moment I knew I was done. No more waiting. No more playing the obedient wife. I was leaving. Tonight. Daniel may have thought he had won, but he had no idea. His life was about to fall apart, and I was going to make sure he watched every second of it. The moment Daniel slapped me, something inside me shattered. I had endured his coldness, his insults, and even his betrayal, but this was different. This was violence. And I wasn't going to wait around to see how much worse it could get. As I stood there, my cheeks still burning from the impact, I made my decision. I was going to leave. Tonight. I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. I knew I couldn't let Daniel see what I was planning. If he sensed even the slightest bit of defiance in me, he might try to stop me. Silently, I picked up the shattered plate from the floor, acting as if nothing had happened. I didn't say a word to him. I just cleaned up the mess and walked away. But inside, my heart was pounding. As soon as I got to the bedroom, I grabbed my phone and called my father. "I need you to send someone to pick me up," I whispered, glancing at the door to make sure Daniel wasn't listening. I'm leaving him. Tonight. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before my father said, I'll be there. I quickly gathered my essentials, important documents, some clothes, my phone charger, and, most importantly, the divorce papers I had already prepared. I had been waiting for the right moment to use them, and now, that moment had come. When I stepped back into the living room, Daniel was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked at me as I approached him and slammed the divorce papers onto the coffee table. His head snapped up, his face twisting in confusion. What the hell is this? He asked, picking up the papers. I crossed my arms and stared at him. It's exactly what you think it is. Sign them. He let out a bitter laugh. You're joking, right? I didn't flinch. Was it funny when you slapped me? When you threw my dinner on the floor? When you cheated on me? His smirk faded. You think you can survive without me? He leaned forward, his voice lowering into something darker. You're 9 months pregnant, Elena.
You need me.
I met his gaze, my voice steady.
No.
I don't. At that moment, headlights flashed through the window. My father had arrived. Daniel turned to look outside, his expression shifting. What the hell is this? He muttered. But before he could react, I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. Elena, don't you dare. I turned back to face him one last time. You don't control me anymore, Daniel. You never will again. And with that, I walked out. As I stepped outside, I felt the weight of years of suffering finally lift off my shoulders. My father stood by the car, his expression unreadable, but his presence alone made me feel safe. I slid into the back seat, closed the door, and as the car pulled away from the house I had once called home, I knew one thing for certain. I was free. As the car drove away from the house I had suffered in for years, I let out a shaky breath, pressing my hand against my swollen belly. My father sat in the front seat, glancing at me through the rearview mirror, his face calm but filled with understanding. You did the right thing, he said, breaking the silence. I nodded, though my emotions were a tangled mess inside me. Relief, anger, exhaustion, it all swirled together. But most of all, I felt determined. I wasn't just leaving Daniel. I was taking back my life. When we arrived at my father's estate, a place I hadn't visited in years, I was greeted warmly by the household staff. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. I settled into a comfortable guest room, trying to let go of the emotional exhaustion that weighed me down. 2 weeks later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Holding him in my arms, I knew that this was my fresh start. No longer trapped in an abusive marriage, no longer living under someone else's control, just me and my son, beginning a new life together. But while I was healing and moving forward, Daniel's world was falling apart. At first, Daniel didn't contact me. I assumed he was too arrogant to believe I had actually left him. Maybe he thought I'd come crawling back. But he was about to realize how wrong he was. One day, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I immediately knew who it was. I answered. What do you want, Daniel? There was a pause before he spoke. You really went through with it, he muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. I rolled my eyes. Of course I did. Did you think I was bluffing? Elena, he said, his tone shifting to something more desperate. I saw you on TV. I frowned. What? Then it hit me. The television special about my father's business. A few weeks after my son was born, my father had done a major interview where he spoke about the family business, our wealth, and the future of the company. The program had also mentioned that I was set to inherit $80 million. Daniel had seen it, and now he wanted something from me. Elena, he continued, we need to talk about this, about us. I made some mistakes, but we can work things out. We're family. I let out a bitter laugh. Family? You only cared about yourself, Daniel. The moment you saw I had money, you suddenly remembered I existed? Elena, he snapped, his frustration seeping through. Half of that inheritance should be mine. I smirked. There it was. The real reason he was calling. Actually, no, I said, my voice cool. Inheritance isn't considered marital property. You get nothing. You can't do this to me, he shouted. You wouldn't have had anything without me. I shook my head. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about you. You lived in that house while treating me like a servant. Now you're drowning in debt, aren't you? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Daniel's life had fallen apart. I leaned back in my chair, cradling my son in my arms. Let me guess, your mistress ran through all your money? Your debts are piling up? And now you want me to fix it? Elena, he began, but I cut him off. You ruined your own life, Daniel. And I want nothing to do with it. I have a child to raise, and I don't want him anywhere near a man like you. You can't keep my son from me, he yelled. I smiled. Oh, but I can. I have sole custody. And as for child support, expect to hear from my lawyer. I hung up and blocked his number. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Daniel had lost everything, his money, his pride, his control over me. He had spent so long tearing me down, convinced that I would never leave. But in the end, I won. I kissed my son's forehead and whispered, "You'll never know a man like him. I promise." And with that, I walked away from the past and into the life I was always meant to have. If you liked this story, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. Your feedback helps us create more engaging content. Subscribe to stay updated with more powerful and inspiring stories. Thank you for watching.